following statements is correct in a two-world economy? This talks about diminishing marginal utility and the connection of that with diminishing marginal rate of substitution. So it talks about marginal utility versus marginal rate of substitution. Now just think about this. For a well-defined preference, my IC looks like this, right? This is O, X, Y. This is my utility function. And for this utility function, if I were to find MRS, MRS will be MUX by MUY, right? We know that as consumption of X increases, the utility I get from X, the marginal utility of X decreases, it diminishes. So we know that this decreases. And we know that as Y increases, right, then marginal utility of Y also decreases. So when I go from point A to point B, X is increasing, so its marginal utility decreases. Y is decreasing, so its marginal utility increases. So when I find this ratio decreases. So we know that this decreases. We know that this decreases. So we are going ahead and we are talking about diminishing marginal utility for both the goods. When I assumed that we have diminishing marginal utility for both the goods, then I think we are coming to some conclusion. We are going towards MRS being diminishing. But there is another thing I need to check, right? If I want to have a diminishing MRS, I need to go ahead and I need to ensure that when I differentiate my MRS with respect to X, this should be negative. As X should increase, my MRS, my slope should diminish. I should be going from steeper to flatter. This is what I should be doing. So this condition should be satisfied, right? In order to show that this is diminishing. Now what I can go ahead and do? I can go ahead and I can maybe use the formula that MRS is MU1 by MUX by MUY. And let's try to take log on both sides. So ln MRS will be ln MUX minus ln MUY. And I need to differentiate this with respect to X because I need to find this condition. So what will I do? 1 by MRS into del MRS by del X is equal to 1 by MUX into del MUX by del X minus 1 by MUY into del MUY by del X will be, this is my equation. I want this to be negative. Acha, one more thing. Some students tend to put this as 0. That's incorrect. Just think about this. If your utility function, let's say, is x square y square, if I differentiate my utility function with respect to y, I will get x square 2y. This will be marginal utility of y. At any point, can't I just differentiate marginal utility of y with respect to x? I will get 2x into 2y. I will get 4xy. That's not 0. Marginal utility of y can be a function of x and y both, right? So that's not incorrect. So I can differentiate it with respect to x. Okay, so coming back here then. So what is there now is that my del MRS with respect to x will be MRS by MUX into del MUX by del X minus MRS into MU upon MUY del MUY by del X. And I want this to be negative. So if I want this to be negative, what is the condition I will have? I will have MRS by MUX del MUX by del X less than MRS by MUY del MUY by del X. So even if I cancel this out, this is the condition that I will have, right? This is my condition, right? So now if I just compare it back, so if I say that, marginal utility is diminishing means I understand that MUX by del MUX by del X, this is negative. I understand that this is negative. But just it being negative does not resolve this problem, right? It does not go ahead and resolve this problem. So therefore, just saying that, this is negative, it does not tell anything about this condition being satisfied. So therefore, we cannot say that just because my marginal utility is diminishing, of one good, I've just taken it for one good, right? For this good, it does not mean that it is going to go ahead and make sure that's neither necessary nor sufficient for my MRS to be diminishing, right? So we are going to go ahead with option D because I need more information on that. I need what is going to be this sign, right? So I cannot comment on diminishing MRS just based on this being negative. This can also very well be negative and it can be -4 when this is just -3, right? So we cannot comment on this further unless we know the next sign of this thing. So it is neither necessary nor sufficient for diminishing MRS. Okay.